Today's lesson is so cool, you're gonna love it. Just a reminder that you have to take notes. This is your lecture material, so make sure you have a one-sentence summary of each slide at the beginning of your notes. So you start by recording the slide number first in the top left corner, and then a one-sentence summary of the slide in your own words, and also a few points that you think are the highlights of the slide as we go through. You're going to show me your notes at the end of the term to impress me. Today's question is, when the price of gas goes up, people use public transit more. Do you agree or disagree? So that's going to be the overarching theme of today's lesson. And whether you agree or disagree, that's fine, that's your opinion. But I want you to give me an analysis of that. So what incentives are involved in this event, what is being sacrificed, and what alternatives are there, right? So if you remember, we learned about all of these in last week about opportunity cost. So pause right now, write this statement at the top of your notes, and then state whether you agree or disagree, and then give at least 2 points for each of them. So 2 points for the incentives, 2 points for the sacrifice, and 2 points for the alternatives, or more. The more you write, the better. So pause here, write what you think, start by recording the slide number, and then we proceed. What's so cool in economics is the power to understand how the world works and to analyze the events. And it's actually quite simple. We have these two concepts of demand and supply, which are extremely useful, and you're going to see them throughout the course. So what is demand? Demand means the buyers or the consumers. They're the same thing. So if you don't like any of these terms, you can simply use the other, okay? They're synonymous. And supply is the opposite side. It would be the sellers or the producers. Again, these are synonyms and you can easily switch one for the other. All right. So demand is how much the buyers value a product given three things. Given their tastes, their budget, and their available options. These are the main determinants of demand. Okay, so these are extremely important things. If you want to understand what drives the people's demand, you have to pay attention to their taste, their budget, and the available options that they have. All right. So that's called the willingness to pay, WTP. That's a special term in economics, and I'm underlining it because it's important. So make sure you write it down, and you might want to highlight it. Supply, on the other side, is how much it costs to make a product. So if you think of ice cream, it might be cheaper to make in a cold place, but over there the demand would be lower, right? So there is this interaction between supply and demand that we're going to look at here. And the main element in supply is the cost, and what determines the cost is the labor and technology, right? So the cost of labor, the workers, and also the level of technology that's available. All right, so pause here, record the slide number, write a one-sentence summary of this slide, and then take a few notes. This is a short slide, but I think you need to take maybe a bit more notes because there are some very important concepts here. So if you want, you can also rewatch it. So the laws of demand and supply are about how people react to a change in price. So when the price of a product rises, what's going to happen? What's your prediction? What do you think is going to happen if something becomes more expensive? And we're going to look at this in two stages, one for demand and one for supply. What do you think the demanders would do if the price goes up, right? Now, the obvious answer is that, well, if something becomes more expensive, people buy less of it, right? So that should be kind of intuitive. One thing that we have to note, which is kind of important, is whenever you make a prediction, whenever you want to predict the results of an event, you have to have this condition of other things being equal. So that's super important. That's our ceteris paribus, the Latin phrase. So we need to keep other things equal on the same, and then we can predict that, okay, well, less of it will be demanded by the buyer. So that's our prediction, right? Now you might be like, hang on, why is that? And there are some reasons for it. So one of them is that it's no longer affordable because it's expensive. Some people can't afford it. Some people are going to opt for other options, something that's cheaper. And that's called the law of demand. So the law of demand says when the price of something goes up, its quantity demanded goes down, right? Throughout the course, you're going to see these arrows a lot, and these arrows are a way of shortening and making life easier. So P goes up, Q goes down. the arrow between them shows if then. So this is the consequence. So one of them is the consequence of the other. It's a causal relationship. Now what's going to happen to the suppliers? Well, the suppliers would be willing to supply more when the price is greater. So in other words, higher price is bad for the buyers, but it's good for the sellers, right? So again, you might be like, hang on, why is that? Well, the reason should be fairly intuitive because they make more profit. So higher price means more profit for them, and they can cover their expenses. So that would be the law of supply. So when the price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. And again, this little arrow here shows a consequence. Okay, I want to emphasize one more time this thing that other things being equal. So when we talk about demand, we assume that supply is the same. When we talk about supply, we assume that demand is the same. So don't mix them. We do only one thing at a time, just one event at a time. All right. Now, given this, you should be able to answer something. And that is the demand curve slopes up or down, showing either a positive or negative correlation. So you should be able to fill that in. So you need to write that down in your notes. And also you should be able to answer the same thing about supply. So if you just look at the laws, you should be able to fill in the blanks and make sure you have that in your notes. Also, I want you to draw a demand curve and a supply curve. So the diagrams that we're going to have from now on look with something similar to what you see with price and quantity on the two axes. And if you know the slope of each line, you should be able to graph it. You can do a straight line. You don't need to make it curvy. Just do a straight line for demand and do a straight line for supply. Okay, you label your demand curve D and you label your supply curve S. So pause here, record the slide number, write a one-sentence summary of this slide and take a few notes. Make sure you fill in the blanks and also graph the demand and supply. So you need to give yourself time to absorb this material. So don't move on unless you have everything done. Here's a simple illustration of how the economy works. We basically have two main sides. One side is the households, which are the same as consumers or buyers or demanders. That's the demand side. The other side are called the firms, and that's the producers, sellers, and suppliers. All right. So the economy is basically the interaction of these two sides. So what the firms do is that they sell goods and services to the households. Remember, GS stands for goods and services. And that is called the product market. Okay. So products is the same as goods and services. The households in return, they have to pay for the goods and services. So you can see that there's a flow of goods and services in one direction, a flow of money in the other direction. But also the households sell their labor, their work, to the firms. Okay, and that's through the factor market. Factor here is the same as resources or inputs. The factors are production, and the firms pay them for that. Okay, so again, you see that there's a flow of labor or resources from households to firms, and in return, the firms pay them the wages that they receive. All right, so you can see in this diagram that the system is very interdependent. The firms depend on the households, and the households depend on the firm. They're mutually complement each other. Okay, that's called the circular flow diagram. Okay, so for this slide, you don't need to write a one-sentence summary, but do your own version of this diagram. I would suggest that you do a little drawing of households and firms to the best of your ability. That also helps you retain the material. This slide is super important. Watch it carefully. You're going to have time to take notes later. It really illustrates what the market is all about and how it works. Okay, so let's say it's Mount Royal and it's a sunny day and you go there with your niece and you walk on the tracks all the way up to the lake. Okay, there are a lot of people, as you can see, and it's the best occasion to buy ice cream. So we're going to look at the ice cream market. Okay, and that means we have to talk about the price, the buyers, and the sellers. So those are the things that are relevant here. And we're going to look at three main stages. So first of all is when the price is very high. So let's say $40, right? So you might be like, what have you done? That's outrageous. Yeah, so $40 for an ice cream. How many buyers do you expect there to be if the price of ice cream is 40? Maybe none, maybe just a couple, right? Only those who are really, really interested. Yeah, and how many sellers do you expect there to be? Well, remember the law of supply. Remember the incentives of the sellers? If they see that the price that they can sell at is $40, then they would be really interested to sell. So let's say you get 6 vans here, right? So at $40, we have 2 buyers and 6 sellers. And the units here work out. So let's say if a van has 100 ice creams in it, then the 2 is really 200. So the units match, okay? Now, that means that we have very few buyers and many sellers, which is really the same as the law of demand and the law of supply, right? So those are the predictions that we can make, okay? Now, notice the 2 buyers that are interested to buy, can they find ice cream to buy? Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of ice cream. There are 6 vans here. They can easily buy an ice cream, right? So the 2 buyers are fine. They get what they want. What about the sellers? The sellers like to sell. Can they sell the ice cream that they have brought? Well, not really, because the price is too much, so people are not interested in buying, right? So here's the thing. Let's say you are the ice cream seller. If you're the seller and your ice cream is melting, how can you get rid of your ice cream? How can you sell your ice cream? What should you do, right? So if there are not enough buyers, you would have to motivate them. You have to incentivize them, okay? So the price would have to go down. Why would that go down? It's because the sellers cannot sell right now. So the sellers are unhappy because they have so many ice cream that they cannot sell. And in order to sell, they would have to lower the price, okay? So that's kind of like the dynamic here. Now, the question so let's say the price falls down to 6, which is a reasonable price. Now, the question for you here is this. Think of the law of demand, right? What does the law of demand say about what happens when the price goes down? What's going to happen to the buyers? Pause for a moment. If it's cheaper for the buyers to buy, there's going to be more buyers, right? What does the law of supply say about the sellers? If the price goes down, what happens to the incentive of the sellers? Well, some of them are going to leave. They're going to they're going to go maybe to another area where the ice cream is more expensive. So what you get is you get 4 buyers and 4 sellers. And in this case, all of the buyers can buy the ice cream that they want. All of the sellers can sell the ice cream that they want. So everyone's happy. Yeah? All right. Let's look at a third scenario where the price is very, very low. So let's say $1. Yeah? So that's a real bargain. Again, think about the laws of supply and demand. So first of all, law of demand. What does it say? If the price is really cheap, how many buyers do you expect there to be? Everyone, right? So everyone wants to buy an ice cream. What about the law of supply? If the price is really cheap, how many sellers have incentive to sell? Maybe just 1, right? So what you get here is many buyers, very few sellers, based on the laws of demand and supply. Oh yeah, you were there with your niece, right? So let's say your niece really wants an ice cream in this case. It's really cheap, so you want to buy it for her. But there is no ice cream. There's a long line, and there's only 1 van, and you know it's not enough for everyone. If you really want an ice cream, what do? If you really want to get an ice cream in this situation, you would have to negotiate, right? You have to pay someone to give their spot to you, or you have to go talk to the seller and say, hey, I'm gonna pay you more. So in this situation, when you have a lot of buyers but not enough sellers, some of the buyers are gonna be unhappy because they cannot get ice cream. They wanted to get it, but there's not enough, right? So they're unhappy. And because they're unhappy, they're gonna negotiate or bid for a higher price. So eventually they're gonna drive the price higher to, let's say, the $6, which is a normal price for ice cream. And at that point, what does the law of demand tell us, right? So if the price goes up, some of the buyers are gonna be, hey, I'm out of here. It's too much, it's a ripoff. What about the sellers? What's the incentive of the sellers involved? Well, they can make more money with $6, so some sellers are going to be attracted to come and sell in this market. So you see how it works? It's very logical. You just have to put together the 2 laws that we learned. So you're going to get 4 and 4, and in this case, everyone's happy again because there are enough buyers and enough sellers. All right. So again, if you want to watch this, this is a story that we're going to build on again in the next slide. But pause here, I would say draw a 3-column table. So for price, buyers, and sellers, and put the numbers there, put the prices and the number of buyers and sellers there, and leave some space for yourself to take notes. I also suggest that you draw some pictures for yourself So maybe draw a picture of ice cream or the vans or the people. Draw that at the bottom of your page so that you have room for notes. Pause here. There's no need to write a one-sentence summary. Just record the slide number and the table. Time to take notes. So this is what you should have already in your notes, the table with 3 numbers, and we're going to divide it into 3 sections. So you can write this next to your table or underneath. So let's look at the first price when it's $40. When the price is high, there are going to be few buyers but many sellers. Okay, and that's called a surplus. So a surplus is excess quantity supplied. So if you look here, this QS is the same as quantity supplied, and surplus is when there are too many sellers but not enough buyers. Okay, so what the sellers are going to do is that they're going to fight over the limited buyers. There are not enough buyers, so they're going to fight among each other. Now it says fight here, but it's not really violent. The real term here is competition. So when you see fight here, what it means is competition. Competition is an economic term. Okay, and when the sellers compete with each other, it's going to drive down the price. So it's going to exert downward pressure on the price. Now when we look at the price being too low, like $1, it's exactly the opposite. So we have many buyers but few sellers, right? So this is called a shortage, which is excess quantity demanded, right? So the QD here is the same as quantity demanded, okay? And shortage is really the same as what you call a scarcity. Okay, so those two terms are more or less synonymous, but we use shortage in this context. So here the buyers are going to fight over the limited supply, and again fight here is the same as competition. And whenever the buyers compete with each other, it's going to drive up the price. So there's going to be upward pressure on the price. All right. In the middle, the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal, which is called the equilibrium. Duh, right? So, and at that point you get price stability. So the prices remain stable because there is nothing to push the price up or down. Okay, so a couple of important concepts here is what you see being underlined. So the surplus, the equilibrium, and the shortage. So make sure you write them down. Pause here. Also write a one-sentence summary. So you start by recording the slide number. Write a one-sentence summary of the gist of this slide for you, and also take a few notes for yourself. Building on the same story, if you're already out of space, you can move on to a new page. That's fine. Let's look at when price is 40. Notice that there are only 2 buyers, which means that there will be 2 units sold. Once the 2 buyers get their ice cream, they're out of the market, and the remaining sellers are going to be part of the surplus. So the surplus is going to be 4, which is the difference between the number of sellers and the number of buyers. Okay, so when the price is very low, you have only 1 seller, so there's going to be only 1 unit sold. The remainder is going to be shortage. So the shortage is the difference between the number of buyers and the number of sellers. Okay, so when the price is 40, in the case of a surplus, all interested buyers can buy. All the 2 people that you have, they can buy and get their ice cream. So they're going to be happy, right? But the sellers, they cannot sell. Only 2 of them can sell, but the remaining sellers are going to be unhappy because they wanted to sell, but they didn't achieve what they wanted. Okay. In the case of a shortage, not all interested buyers can buy. There are 8 of them, but only 1 of them can buy, right? So the rest of them, the 7 of them, are going to be unhappy, whereas the sellers, all of them, in this case only 1, they can sell, so they're going to be happy. Okay, so being happy or unhappy depends on whether you can achieve or not achieve what you wanted to do. Okay, in the middle, the unit sold is 4. There is no shortage and no surplus. Okay, so the market equilibrium is where everyone's happy. All of the buyers who wanted to buy can get what they want. All of the sellers who want to sell, they can sell as they want, right? That is when you have maximum level of production and the buyers enjoy the highest consumption, right? Notice that the unit sold here is 2, and at the bottom it's 1, but in the middle it's 4. So the maximum level happens in the middle, right? So this equilibrium is really our ideal. This is where we want to be. This is the right price of the market, okay? And that is called efficient because there's no waste. Okay, so waste means a shortage or a surplus. If you like, this is the definition of efficiency, right? So not wastefulness. Okay, so pause here, write a one-sentence summary of this slide. Start with the slide number, and also write a few notes in your own words for this slide. Wow, that's so cool. Aren't you excited? So you can see that the market process is extremely empowering. Now, the market to be defined is the interaction of buyers and sellers. It's the exchange of a good or service. Okay, so market is really a mechanism. It's a system. It's a process of exchange. Okay, and it can be defined as demand plus supply. So when you put demand and supply together, that gives you the market. All right. And there is a market for everything. Literally speaking, there's a market for everything. So this is a very broad meaning. There's a market for education. There are people who buy education and those who sell it. Even in cases where there is no actual payment, when there's no money, still there's a market because we're spending resources. We're putting time. So there's also a market for love, where the two lovers could be both buyers and sellers. And if you look at things with this eye, you can analyze things and predict things a lot. So this is very empowering. Okay. We also saw that the free markets always converge to equilibrium. Remember, when there was a shortage, the price went up. When there was a surplus, the price went down. Because if you are not at equilibrium, then competition among either buyers or sellers will lead us back to equilibrium, right? So this thing, by the way, this is equilibrium. That's a short form, and that's called the invisible hand. You might have heard of it. It's by Adam Smith. Adam Smith is the father of modern economics, so probably the most famous economist. So he talked about this invisible hand, which kind of regulates and makes things okay. Free market is where buyers and sellers can choose what is best for themselves without any manipulation or coercion by the government. So this is without, okay? So this word free market is not somewhere where everything is for free. Good luck with that, right? Free market means free of intervention or coercion by the government. Okay, so there is an invisible hand in the market where, because the invisible hand really works to sort things out and get us back to equilibrium, there is no need for the government's hand. So the government's hand is a visible hand, but we don't need that because the market forces take care of the shortage or surplus. Prices are not determined by a centralized or central authority, and this central authority is the same as government. So whenever in economics you see the word central or central authority, it means the government. All right, so time to pause here and record this slide number, write a one-sentence summary of your slide, and take some notes in your own words. Let's do some fun stuff. Let's graph the market. Okay, so you can watch this first as I show it to you, and then you can do a graph for yourself. When you do your own graph, make it very large and neat, and from now on our graphs are going to be in the same format. Okay, so we're going to place quantity on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical axis. Okay, and this also gives you the answer to the question that you had before about the shape of the demand and the supply, right? So your demand curve is going to slope downwards and your supply curve slopes upward. Okay, in this course we always do the graphs with a straight line with the supply and demand. You could also do it curvy if you want. In some books or some teachers do it curvy. Doesn't matter. What really matters is the slope, the correlation. Okay, also the word curve refers to both straight line and curvy lines. Okay, so that's a generic term. When you say demand curve or supply curve, it could be straight. That's fine. Okay, so in the middle, in the intersection of them, we have this point E, which is the equilibrium. Okay, and the E corresponds to a price, which is the equilibrium price, and a quantity, which is the equilibrium quantity. And we always write the name of the market at the top. So in this case, it's the ice cream market. Okay, so this is really the picture of any market. If you have the car market, it would be the same, except that you would have the supply and demand of cars, price of cars, quantity of cars. If you have the housing market, if you have the stock market, if you have whatever, it's going to be exactly the same shape. Okay, and notice we don't have any numbers, so you don't have to worry about that. So let's get rid of that line to have more notes. If the price is above the equilibrium price, it's more than its value to the consumers, right? So when the price is really high, it means that the consumers don't value the product that much, and that causes inefficiency or waste. So that's where you get the surplus. So if you're told to draw surplus, surplus would be the area above the equilibrium. If the price is below the equilibrium, then it doesn't cover the cost of production. And if the producers can't cover their costs, again, that creates inefficiency. It means it's not worth it. So that is the area of shortage. Okay, this diagram, this neat diagram of supply and demand was first developed by Alfred Marshall, an economist, a British economist. So that the credit goes to him. So pause here. There is no need for a sentence summary. Just draw the diagram for yourself. Make sure you label everything. So all of your curves, all of your axes, and the name of the market, write that on the top, and do a neat job. If you have a ruler, please use a ruler and don't make a mess. One thing to point out is that the price is not the value or worth of something. The price is really a signal. What kind of signal? It's really a piece of information. It shows us how a good or service can be produced and consumed in the most efficient way. Price is a point of balance, basically. It tells us where things balance out. Okay, so if we want to get to the point of efficiency, we have three main conditions. One is that efficiency means that the product is made at the lowest cost, and it is consumed by those who appreciate it the most, and there is no excess demand or supply, so there is no shortage or surplus. These are the really main conditions for efficiency, and we get it at the equilibrium price. Okay, but to get there, we need to know every producer's cost and every consumer's preference or their willingness to pay, right? Now, how can you know that, right? So we are not God, and we don't have that information. That information is dispersed among millions of people. So there's no way for any one person or one institution to know what is the right price. Okay, that's why the government can't maximize happiness. The price that the government sets is an arbitrary price. Okay, because they don't know the cost of everyone, and they don't know the preference of everyone. Okay, now we're not out of luck, because there is a better solution. And the better solution is a market solution, which is the free interaction of buyers and sellers would maximize efficiency. Okay, so all it takes is not to assume that people are babies who have to be taken care of, and not to be impatient. If you have patience enough, the market process is going to take care of it. Okay, so the idea here is not to give too much role to the government, because they don't know the information. Price is a signal, price is a piece of information which is not available to anyone. It's just dispersed among the society. Okay, so pause here, write the slide number. If you want, you can watch again this slide and write a one-sentence summary in your own words and take some notes. A very special kind of market is the labor market. Its shape is the same. You have supply and demand, and we call it labor market. And the product here is the time and energy of the workers. That is what's being exchanged. Remember, market means the interaction of the buyers and sellers and the process of exchange, right? The difference is, who are the suppliers of labor? Who are the ones who sell labor? Well, the supply of laborers are the workers, the households. And the demanders, who are the ones who demand workers, the buyers of work. Well, that would be the firms and employers. So the only part that's different is that the suppliers are not the firms, but it's the households, and the demanders are not households, but it's the firms, right? But in terms of the shape of the graph is exactly the same. The dynamic, the logic is exactly the same. The wage rate is the price of labor. That's how much people sell their labor for, right? So instead of P, we are gonna put W, which is for wage. Okay, also notice that I'm putting these L's as a subscript here. This is just for a reminder. It's not necessary, but it's just to clarify that we're talking about the supply of labor and the demand of labor and the quantity of labor. So we're going to have the equilibrium, where there is the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium wage rate. Okay, unemployment is when people are willing to offer themselves for work but can't find a job, right? So this is people. Which means, now notice, people here are the sellers. So there are many sellers who want to offer themselves, but they can't find a job. So what is that called when you have a lot of sellers, but not enough demand for them? It's called a surplus, right? So unemployment is the same as the surplus of labor. So this is kind of important. Think of unemployment always as a surplus of labor, and the logic is what you see here, that the sellers are the households or the workers. And also an important element in unemployment is willingness. So it's the idea of being willing to work. Those are the people who are unemployed. If someone doesn't have a job, they are not necessarily unemployed. Unemployed is only those who are willing to work, but they can't have a job. All right. So pause here for a moment, write the slide number and write a one-sentence summary in your own words, and draw a diagram for yourself and write the gist of this slide. Let's review today's session through a concept map, which is a very excellent way of putting everything together. So we talked about the buyers and sellers, where the buyers follow the law of demand and the sellers follow the law of supply. And their exchange or interaction is called the market, which is governed by the invisible hand. And the invisible hand leads us to the equilibrium, where we get efficiency. Okay, efficiency means there is no shortage and no surplus. Okay, so shortage is what makes the buyers unhappy and surplus is what makes the sellers unhappy. What I would emphasize in this concept map are the concepts of surplus and shortage. Okay, so those are kind of important, and also the concept of efficiency. Efficiency is what economists are obsessed about, and you're going to see again in the course. So what I would say is draw a concept map of yourself using the concepts that you see here, the boxes. If you want to have what I have, it's okay as long as you make at least 2 changes. Okay, so you have to make 2 changes. You have to change the wording somewhere or change the link somewhere. So try to make it a little bit personal and for yourself. There's a lot of ways where you can be creative. Okay, notice that the arrows show the direction of how to read it, and the description and the arrows show the kind of relationship involved. So pause for a few minutes and draw a concept map of yourself and make sure you have at least 2 changes to what I have, or make just your own. Okay, it could be simple, it could be messy, that's okay. Just do your best. So thank you for your patience. The last thing to do is to revisit our question of the day. Again, take a few minutes to answer this question one more time. You may agree or disagree as before, but your 3 answers to the 3 questions should show some deepening of your understanding. So think about the incentives involved, what is being sacrificed, and what are the alternatives in this situation. Okay. Again, I'm going to show you some sample answers from a student, which I think are very good and deep. But these are just a sample. Pause right now before you see the answers. Pause right now and write your own answers. So the sample answers are, in terms of incentives, there is the law of demand and there's a substitution effect that's taking place. In terms of the sacrifice is the time it takes longer to use the public transit, and also comfort and independence, those are being sacrificed. And possible alternatives are carpooling, biking, or walking. Okay, again, don't copy the suggested or the sample answer here, but you can get ideas from that and write it in your own words. And the important thing is, as you go on, you keep deepening and developing your own understanding. Have a great day.